Okay, then some important thing we need to talk about when talking about takeoff is ground effect. You hear about that in the theory course. To sum it up really briefly, in a distance or at an altitude between the ground level and the wingspan of the airplane, you will have less induced drag due to the proximity to the ground, and this less induced drag will give the airplane better performance. This means that an airplane is actually already able to fly, if this is the ground, in ground speed, when at the same speed it wouldn't, in ground effect, sorry, when at the same speed it wouldn't be able to fly out of ground effect. This is something to keep in mind, because you may be able to lift off in ground effect, but then if you take it out of ground effect too early, you may settle back to the runway, or you may never be able to climb, and then you will just fly along at the upper edge of the ground effect area and not be able to climb over those obstacles. So we will discuss this a little bit more in the soft field takeoff, where it's even more relevant. What I really want to tell you is just, if you plan to climb with Vx, then only climb out of ground effect when you have reached Vx. So you lift off in many airplanes. If you lift off at rotation speed, you will then pretty quickly in normal conditions have reached Vx already in the ground effect area, and then you can climb right away. But if you, for some reasons, you have not reached a safe climbing speed like Vx after liftoff, it's important to keep the nose down in ground effect until you have reached that speed, and then pull out of ground effect. Because if you pull out of ground effect too early, as I've said, you may not be able to climb any further. And there are accidents where airplanes have actually flown over the whole runway just a few feet above ground, didn't abort the takeoff, but the performance was obviously not sufficient, because the performance was just sufficient for the airplane to stay in ground effect, but not out of it. And then the end of the runway was approaching, and they couldn't clear those obstacles and crashed into them. So be aware of the ground effect and the increased performance inside it. Okay, so to conclude, let's mention a few common mistakes that are done during takeoffs. First of all, very important mistake is a failure to check the performance. To attempt a takeoff under difficult conditions on a short runway without checking the takeoff performance. Actually, you should do that before every flight. And then the failure to check the conditions again before departure. Another common mistake is to omit checking the approach sector when lining up on a runway for traffic. Also the wrong use of throttle, so too fast or too slow when applying takeoff power. Speaking of throttle, it's also my policy to keep my hand on the throttle until I reach a safe altitude, at least 500 feet above ground. Well, why is that? Well, first of all, there have been events where throttle levers were not adjusted properly, and due to vibrations and so on of the airplane and the engine, throttle lever was moving back just a little bit during takeoff, so you don't have full takeoff throttle available, and during takeoff I want full power. So by keeping your hand on the throttle and pushing it in, you make sure that you really have all this power available. And furthermore, if you have any problem, it makes aborting the takeoff quicker and easier. Imagine you have you have almost reached rotation speed, and then you see a red light coming up, oil pressure warning. I have my hand there, I can just pull back and stop the airplane. Even more important, if I'm on a longer runway and I have already lifted off and I get a serious warning. If I have enough runway in front of me, I can just pull back the power immediately and land on the runway. So it just gives you this full control, whether you need full power or idle power or whatever. during takeoff, and that's why I keep my hand on the throttle until I reach a safe altitude. Well, another common mistake during takeoff is the failure to keep the proper takeoff or initial climb attitude. So after rotation, really adjust your attitude to your known climb attitude for the given speed you want to fly, and then make those small adjustments to fine-tune the speed with the elevator. It's also a common mistake is to over-control the elevator, so kind of chasing your speed and doing this during climb. Also always scan to the left and right to your wingtips. Do not only scan just over the nose of the airplane, because this will might induce a bank, inadvertent turning of the airplane. So always be sure to keep your wings level during departure, except of course if you need to urgently avoid an obstacle, and the only way to do is by turning. But if you do that, keep in mind that by turning you will reduce your climb rate at a given speed. Another mistake would be to not properly fly the airspeed. Now let's say I want to take off over some obstacles, so I really want to fly my VX speed until, let's say, 500 feet above ground. I will only have this best angle of climb speed if I really fly this speed. So if it's 55 knots, yeah, you shouldn't fly 65, because then this will be more closely to VY probably, and you will not have the greatest angle of climb that you need if you want to avoid some obstacles. So really be careful to fly your speed as exactly as possible. All right, so this concludes the lesson about actually the briefing about normal takeoffs. So I'd say let's hop into the airplane and try one. See you there.